My name is Rebecca Matthews, and at 42, I thought I'd finally made it. A corner office in downtown Chicago managing investment portfolios worth millions, 2 incredible kids, and a stunning Victorian house in Evanston with lake views. I bought that $1.2 million home outright for my parents after they lost everything in the 2008 crash. But while I was working 14-hour days to provide for everyone, they packed my children's belongings and moved them into the freezing, unfinished basement. Why? To make room for their precious golden grandson, Tyler. When I came home to find my babies crying in the dark, shivering on a bare mattress, my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "This is my house now, Rebecca. You should be grateful I'm even letting them stay." I didn't argue. I just smiled. Because what she didn't know was that her name had never been on the deed, and the eviction notice was already drafted. Before we continue, drop a comment below if you've ever been forced to choose between your parents and your children. And hit that subscribe button, because what happened next changed everything. The sound of my heels clicking across the marble entryway echoed through the empty house. It was 9:30 p.m. on a Thursday, and I'd just left the office after a marathon session preparing for a client presentation. The Chicago skyline had been glittering behind me as I drove north along Lakeshore Drive, and all I could think about was getting home to tuck in my kids. But the moment I stepped through that heavy oak door, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. Usually I'd hear Emma's piano practice drifting down from upstairs, or hear Jackson's laughter as he video called his friends. Tonight, nothing. Just the low hum of the heating system, and an eerie, unsettling silence that made my stomach drop. I set down my briefcase and called out, "Emma? Jackson? Mom's home?" My voice bounced off the high ceilings and came back to me unanswered. Then I heard it. Faint, almost imperceptible. The sound of someone crying. It wasn't coming from the second floor where their bedrooms were. It was coming from below, from the basement. My heart stopped. I kicked off my heels and ran barefoot across the cold hardwood floor. I yanked open the basement door so hard it slammed against the wall. I practically flew down those stairs, my breath catching in my throat with each step. What I saw when I reached the bottom nearly brought me to my knees. My children, Emma, my brilliant 1-year-old daughter, and Jackson, my sweet-natured 9-year-old son, were huddled together on a stained mattress that had been dragged down from the guest room. It was just lying there on the concrete floor, surrounded by hastily packed boxes and garbage bags stuffed with their belongings. Their clothes, their books, Jackson's collection of superhero figures, Emma's violin case, all of it piled against the damp cinder block walls like trash. The basement wasn't even finished. We used it for storage, old holiday decorations, broken furniture waiting to be hauled away. There was exposed insulation in the ceiling, a musty smell of mildew, and a draft so cold I could see my breath. Emma looked up at me, her face blotchy and tear-stained, her lips trembling. "Mom," she whispered, her voice so small and broken it shattered my heart into a million pieces. "Grandma Margaret said we have to sleep down here now. She said Cousin Tyler needs our rooms." I dropped to my knees and pulled them both into my arms. They were freezing, their little bodies shaking. "What happened, baby?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady even though rage was already building in my chest. "Tell Mommy what happened." Jackson buried his face in my shoulder, his voice muffled and choked with tears. "Grandma packed our stuff while we were at school. She said Tyler is the real grandson, and he deserves the best rooms in the house. She said we're too loud and we don't appreciate what we have," she said. "She said we should be grateful we even have a roof over our heads." I closed my eyes, holding my children tighter. The real grandson. The words cut through me like a knife. These were my kids, my babies, the ones I'd carried, birthed, raised, sacrificed everything for. And my own mother had thrown them into a cold, dark basement like they were nothing. I kissed the tops of their heads, forcing myself to stay calm. "Stay right here for just 1 minute, okay? Don't move. Mommy's going to fix this." I stood up, and as I turned toward the stairs, something inside me shifted. The fear, the hurt, the years of trying to please my mother, it all crystallized into something cold and sharp and utterly unbreakable. I climbed those stairs slowly, deliberately, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached, I wasn't going upstairs to have a conversation. I was going to war. I walked through the main floor, past the living room with its expensive furniture that my mother had picked out, past the dining room where we'd hosted countless family dinners that I'd paid for. I climbed the grand staircase to the second floor, my hand gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. I knew exactly where I was going. The children's wing. Emma and Jackson's rooms were side by side at the end of the hallway, two of the best bedrooms in the house, with ensuite bathrooms and huge windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Or at least, they used to be. The door to Emma's room was wide open, and what I saw made my blood boil. All of her carefully curated decorations were gone. The gallery wall of family photos, the bookshelf she'd organized by color, the pale purple curtains she'd picked out herself, all of it erased. In their place was a brand new bedroom set that must have cost thousands. A massive king-sized bed with a designer comforter, a 75-inch flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, a PlayStation 5 still in its box, and sports posters plastered everywhere. And there, in the middle of the bed, shoes on, jumping up and down like it was a trampoline, was my 10-year-old nephew, Tyler. My mother, Margaret, was standing near the window, 65 years old with steel gray hair and a perpetually pinched expression. She was humming to herself, completely relaxed, folding what looked like brand new Egyptian cotton sheets. "Mom." My voice came out flat and cold. She didn't even turn around. "Oh, Rebecca, you're back," she said breezily, shaking out a pillowcase. "Just getting Tyler's room set up. Your sister Nicole and her husband Derek are moving in next week, and Tyler needs a proper space. Somewhere quiet where he can focus on his studies. You know how important his education is." I stood in the doorway, my fists clenched at my sides. "A proper space," I repeated slowly. "And you decided the best way to give him, that was to throw my 9 and 1-year-old children into an unfinished basement?" That made her pause. She turned around, and the look on her face was pure indignation. "Don't you dare use that tone with me, Rebecca Lynn Matthews. I am your mother. I don't need your permission to make decisions about my own home. Your kids are fine. They're young. They'll adjust. Stop being so dramatic and selfish. Honestly, you're 42 years old. When are you going to grow up and learn to respect your elders? My own home." The words hung in the air like a slap. I felt something inside me go very still, very quiet. The anger didn't disappear. It crystallized into something harder, colder, more dangerous. My own home. I thought about being 19 years old, the first person in my family to go to college. I'd gotten a full academic scholarship to Northwestern University's business program, one of the most competitive in the country. I'd run home with the acceptance letter, bursting with pride, thinking this was the moment my mother would finally see me, really see me. She was in the kitchen with my aunt, drinking coffee. I showed her the letter, my hands shaking with excitement. She barely glanced at it. "Well," she said, stirring her coffee, "I suppose they needed to fill their quota." Then she looked at me, her eyes cold. "Now you need to figure out how to actually make money, Rebecca. Not just play around with numbers and theories. This family needs someone who can provide, not another dreamer." I stood there, my achievement reduced to nothing, my joy extinguished in an instant. 23 years later, standing in the $1.2 million home I'd bought with my own money, nothing had changed. But I had. The shaking in my hands stopped. My breathing steadied. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I saw her clearly. Not as the authority figure I'd spent decades trying to please, but as someone who would never, ever give me what I needed. The realization was liberating. I smiled. It was a small, cold smile, and it made my mother's triumphant expression falter just slightly. "You're right, Mom," I said quietly. "This is your home. You should be comfortable here." She blinked, surprised by my sudden agreement. She crossed her arms, satisfied. "Good. I'm glad you're finally seeing sense. Now, go tell your children to keep the noise down. Tyler needs his rest before his parents arrive tomorrow." I nodded slowly. "Of course. I'll take care of it." I turned and walked away, my mind already racing through everything I needed to do. Behind me, I heard Tyler whooping as he jumped on Emma's bed, and my mother laughing indulgently. Neither of them had any idea what was coming. I went back down to the basement and found Emma and Jackson exactly where I'd left them, curled up together on that terrible mattress. "Come on, babies," I said gently, reaching out my hands. "We're going to a hotel tonight. Pack your favorite things. We're having an adventure." Emma looked up at me, confused. "But Mom, what about school tomorrow?" I smiled, a real smile this time. "Don't worry about school. I'll handle everything. Right now we're going to go somewhere warm and safe, and tomorrow Mommy's going to fix this. I promise." We packed quickly. I grabbed their school uniforms, their favorite stuffed animals, Jackson's blanket he'd had since he was a baby. Within 20 minutes, we were in my car, driving toward the Four Seasons in downtown Chicago. I checked us into a 2-bedroom suite, ordered room service, let the kids pick whatever they wanted from the menu, and while they ate chocolate chip pancakes at 10 p.m. and watched cartoons, I sat at the desk in the corner of the suite and I made phone calls. The first call was to my lawyer, David Chen, a partner at one of Chicago's most prestigious firms. I'd worked with him on corporate deals for years. He answered on the second ring. "Rebecca? It's late. Is everything okay?" "No," I said calmly. "It's not. I need you to prepare an immediate eviction notice. I need it served tomorrow morning." There was a pause. "An eviction? Against who?" "My parents. They're living in my house in Evanston, the one I bought. The deed is solely in my name. They've violated the informal lease agreement by subletting to unauthorized occupants and by endangering my minor children." David was quiet for a moment. Then I heard the sound of him opening his laptop. "Okay, I'll need documentation, but if what you're saying is accurate, we can file for an emergency eviction based on safety concerns. I can have it drafted tonight and filed first thing tomorrow morning." "Are you sure about this, Rebecca? These are your parents." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "Good. I'll call you in the morning." I hung up and stared out the window at the Chicago lights twinkling below. I felt calm, focused. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next morning, I dropped Emma and Jackson at school with extra lunch money and a promise that everything would be okay. Then I drove to my office, called my assistant, and cleared my calendar for the day. I had work to do, but it wasn't the kind that involved spreadsheets or client meetings. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was David. "It's done," he said. "The notice has been filed. A process server will deliver it to your parents at 2 p.m. today. The grounds are immediate eviction due to unauthorized occupancy and endangerment of minors. Given the circumstances and the fact that you own the property outright, the judge signed off without hesitation." "Thank you, David." "Rebecca," he said, his tone gentler now, "are you really ready for this? This is going to blow up your family." I thought about my children crying in that cold basement. My family blew up the moment my mother chose her golden grandchild over my kids. I'm just making it official. That afternoon, I sat in my office, high above the Chicago River, and I waited. At 2:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "This is Margaret Matthews. What have you done? Call me immediately." I didn't call. Instead, I texted back a single sentence. "You made your choice. Now live with the consequences." My phone exploded. Texts, voicemails, missed calls from my mother, my father, my sister Nicole, even from my aunt. I ignored every single one. At 5 p.m., I left my office, picked up Emma and Jackson from their after-school program, and drove back to the Four Seasons. We ordered pizza, watched movies, and I tucked them into their hotel beds. "Mom," Emma asked as I kissed her goodnight, "are we ever going back to the house?" I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "Yes, baby, we're going home very soon. And when we do, it's going to be just us. No one is ever going to make you feel unwelcome in your own home again. I promise." She smiled, relieved, and closed her eyes. I sat there in the dark hotel room, listening to my children breathe, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. 3 days later, I received confirmation from David that my parents had been formally evicted. They'd been given 72 hours to remove their belongings, supervised by a county sheriff. My sister Nicole had shown up with Tyler, screaming and threatening to sue, but the law was clear. The house was mine. They had no legal right to be there. On the fourth day, I took Emma and Jackson back to Evanston. I unlocked the front door and we stepped inside. The house was quiet, but this time, it was a good quiet. It was ours. Emma and Jackson ran upstairs to their bedrooms. I'd hired a service to come in and restore everything to exactly how it had been. Emma's purple curtains were back up. Jackson's superhero posters were on his walls. Their beds were made with fresh sheets. All the expensive furniture my mother had bought for Tyler's room was gone, donated to a children's charity. I stood in the doorway of Emma's room and watched her twirl in the middle of the floor, laughing. "It's back, Mom. It's all back." Jackson came running in and tackled her in a hug, and they both collapsed on her bed, giggling. I smiled, leaning against the doorframe. This was what home was supposed to feel like. Safe, warm, full of laughter. Not fear, not walking on eggshells, not constantly trying to earn love that would never be freely given. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in my home office and I allowed myself to think about what I'd done. I'd evicted my own parents. I'd cut off my sister. I'd blown up my entire extended family. And I didn't regret it for a single second. The voicemails continued for weeks. My father, sobbing, begging me to reconsider. My mother, alternating between rage and self-pity. My sister Nicole, threatening legal action that would go nowhere. I didn't respond to any of them. I changed my number. I blocked them on social media. I moved forward. And slowly, carefully, I began to rebuild my life. This time on my own terms. 6 weeks after the eviction, my assistant buzzed me at work. "Rebecca, there's a Margaret Matthews here to see you. She says she's your mother. She doesn't have an appointment." I paused, my hand hovering over the intercom. "Tell her I'm unavailable." "She says she'll wait." I sighed. "Then she'll be waiting a very long time." But an hour later, my curiosity got the better of me. I walked out to the reception area. My mother was sitting there, her purse clutched in her lap, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen her. "Rebecca," she said, standing up. "Please, I just need 5 minutes." I looked at her for a long moment, then nodded toward a conference room. We went inside and I closed the door. I didn't sit down. I stood by the window, arms crossed, waiting. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't understand what I was doing. I didn't realize how it would affect the children. Please, can we start over? Can you forgive me?" I looked at her, this woman who'd given birth to me but had never truly seen me. "You threw my children into a basement, Mom. You told them they weren't the real grandchildren. You did that while they were at school so they'd come home to find their entire world had been ripped away. And when I confronted you, you told me it was your house and I should be grateful." Her face crumpled. I know. I was wrong. I see that now. Please, Rebecca, I'm your mother." "You were my mother," I said quietly. "But you stopped acting like it a long time ago. You spent my entire life making me feel like I was never good enough. You diminished every achievement, dismissed every success. And the one time I needed you to protect my children, you chose someone else. I can forgive you, Mom. But I can't have a relationship with you. Not anymore. It's not safe for me or for my kids." She started crying, her hands shaking. "Please don't do this. I'll change. I promise I'll change." I shook my head. "I hope you do change, Mom. I really do. But you're going to have to do it for yourself, not for me. We're done here." I opened the conference room door and walked out, leaving her sitting there alone. And as I walked back to my office, I realized that I felt lighter, freer. I'd spent 42 years carrying the weight of her expectations, her disappointments, her emotional manipulation. I wasn't carrying it anymore. That evening, I told Emma and Jackson what had happened. I kept it simple, age-appropriate. "Grandma and I aren't going to see each other for a while," I said. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that can't be fixed right away, and that's okay. But I want you both to know that this has nothing to do with you. You are loved. You are wanted. And you will always have a home with me." Emma looked at me seriously. Is it because of what happened in the basement? I nodded. Partly, yes. Good, she said firmly. Because that was really mean. Jackson nodded in agreement. Yeah, really mean. I pulled them both into a hug and felt tears sting my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of gratitude. Gratitude that they were resilient, that they trusted me, that they knew they were loved. That was all that mattered. Months passed, then a year. Life settled into a new normal. Emma joined the school orchestra. Jackson made the travel soccer team. I got promoted to senior vice president at my firm. We hosted birthday parties and holiday dinners, just the three of us, and they were filled with laughter and joy. I started dating again, something I hadn't done in years. I took up painting. I traveled with the kids to places I'd always wanted to see. New York, San Francisco, even a week in Hawaii. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the kitchen making lunch when the doorbell rang. Emma ran to answer it before I could stop her. I heard her gasp. Grandpa Joe? I froze, my hand gripping the counter. I walked quickly to the front door. My father was standing there, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Emma stepped back, uncertain. Hi, sweetheart, he said softly. Then he looked at me. Rebecca, I know I shouldn't be here. I know you said you didn't want contact. But I needed to see you, just once. I looked at Emma. Go upstairs, baby. I'll call you when lunch is ready. She nodded and ran up the stairs, glancing back once with worried eyes. I turned to my father. You shouldn't be here, Dad. I know, he said. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying. I know, but I needed to tell you something. Your mother and I, we're getting divorced. I blinked, surprised despite myself. What? He nodded slowly. After everything that happened, I started going to therapy. For the first time in my life, I started really looking at our marriage, at the way she treated you, at the way I stood by and let it happen. I realized I'd been enabling her for decades. I'd been choosing the path of least resistance, instead of doing what was right. And I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, processing. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he continued. I don't deserve that, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what we did to you, what I did to you, and I'm so sorry. He looked down at his hands. I also wanted to tell you that I'm proud of you. I should have said it years ago, decades ago, but I'm saying it now. You're an incredible woman, Rebecca, an incredible mother. And I'm sorry I never told you that when it mattered. I felt tears welling up, and I blinked them back. Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know. But I can't have you in my life right now. Maybe someday, but not now. It's too soon and I need to protect my kids. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand. I just wanted you to know. That's all. He turned to leave, then paused. I'm moving to Arizona, starting fresh. If you ever want to reach out, your cousin Hannah has my new number, but I'll understand if you don't. I watched him walk to his car, get in, and drive away. I closed the door and leaned against it, my emotions a tangled mess. Part of me wanted to run after him, to forgive him, to rebuild something, but the stronger part of me knew that I'd made the right choice. Some boundaries, once set, need to stay in place. That night, I told the kids that Grandpa Joe had stopped by. Is he coming back? Jackson asked. I don't think so, buddy, I said gently. At least not for a while. Emma nodded thoughtfully. That's okay. We're good, just us, right? I smiled, pulling them both close. Yeah, baby. We're more than good. We're great. And we were. Over the next few years, I watched my children grow and thrive. Emma got into a prestigious music program. Jackson became captain of his soccer team. They were confident, happy kids who knew they were loved unconditionally. And that was everything. I never heard from my mother again. I heard through the family grapevine that she'd moved in with my sister Nicole and that it wasn't going well. Apparently, Nicole's husband Derek had left her after discovering she'd been hiding massive credit card debt, and the two of them were living in a small apartment, barely making ends meet. Tyler had gotten into trouble at school. There was talk of therapy, of behavior problems. I felt a pang of sympathy for the kid. He was just a child, after all. But I didn't reach out. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. 5 years after the eviction, I was sitting in my office when my assistant buzzed me. "Rebecca, there's a call for you. It's from a lawyer representing the estate of Margaret Matthews." My heart skipped a beat. Put it through. The lawyer was professional, detached. He informed me that my mother had passed away from a stroke. She'd left a will, and I was mentioned in it. "She left you a letter," he said. "Would you like me to mail it to you?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Please." The letter arrived 3 days later. I held it in my hands for a long time before opening it. When I finally did, I found 2 pages of my mother's handwriting, shaky and uneven. "Dear Rebecca," it began. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that I spent the last 5 years of my life understanding, truly understanding, what I did to you. I destroyed our relationship. I hurt your children. I chose pride and control over love and family, and I lost everything because of it." The letter went on, detailing her regrets, her realizations, her sorrow. She wrote about how she'd pushed away everyone who'd ever loved her, how she'd ended up alone and bitter. She wrote about watching Nicole struggle and realizing that enabling her hadn't helped anyone. She wrote about wishing she could go back and do everything differently. "I don't expect you to mourn me," the letter concluded, "but I hope that one day you can remember that I did love you, even if I was terrible at showing it. I hope you're happy, Rebecca. I hope your children are thriving, and I hope that you've built the life you deserve, the life I should have supported instead of sabotaging, with regret and love, Mom." I sat there in my office, tears streaming down my face, holding that letter. It was the apology I'd waited my entire life to hear, and it had come too late. I cried for the mother I'd never had. I cried for the relationship that could have been. And then I folded the letter, put it in my desk drawer, and I moved on. Because that's what you do. You grieve what you lost, you accept what you can't change, and you keep moving forward. I didn't go to the funeral. I sent flowers and a card, but I stayed home with my kids. We spent the day at the beach, building sandcastles and collecting shells. That evening, Emma asked me if I was sad about Grandma. "A little," I admitted, "but mostly I'm sad about what could have been, not what was." She nodded, wise beyond her years. "That makes sense." And it did. It made perfect sense. Today, I'm 47 years old. Emma is 16, captain of her high school debate team and already being recruited by Ivy League schools. Jackson is 14, a straight-A student who wants to be an engineer. We live in the same beautiful house in Evanston, but now it's filled with laughter and music and the chaos of teenagers and their friends. I've been promoted to chief investment officer. I've traveled the world with my kids. I've built a life that I'm proud of. And most importantly, I've built a relationship with my children based on respect, trust, and unconditional love. They know that they can come to me with anything. They know that I will always choose them, protect them, support them. They know that home is a safe place, not a battlefield. That's the legacy I'm leaving them, not the one I inherited. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did, if I regret evicting my parents and cutting off my family. The answer is simple: no. Not for a single second. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my mother couldn't love me the way I needed. I regret the years I spent trying to earn approval that was never going to come. But I don't regret protecting my children. I don't regret setting boundaries. I don't regret choosing their well-being over my mother's feelings. Because here's what I learned. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You cannot sacrifice your children to appease a parent who will never be satisfied. And you cannot build a healthy life on a foundation of guilt and obligation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say no. And sometimes the best gift you can give your children is showing them that they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, even if it means cutting ties with people who refuse to give them that. My name is Rebecca Matthews. And for 42 years I chased the approval of a mother who was incapable of giving it. I sacrificed my peace, my boundaries, and nearly my relationship with my own children trying to earn love that should have been freely given. The day I stopped chasing and started protecting was the day my real life began. It wasn't easy. It hurt like hell, but it was necessary, and it was worth it. Today, when I look at my children, I see confident, secure young people who know their worth. They don't question whether they're loved. They don't walk on eggshells wondering if they're good enough. They just are. And that breaks the cycle. That changes everything. That's the real victory. If you're in a situation where you're being forced to choose between toxic family members and your own well-being or the well-being of your children, I want you to know this. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to walk away. You are not obligated to maintain relationships with people who harm you, even if they're family, especially if they're family. Because family isn't just about blood, it's about love, respect, and mutual support. And if those things aren't present, then it's just biology. Nothing more. The road I chose wasn't easy. There were lonely nights and moments of doubt. There were family members who called me selfish, ungrateful, cruel. There were holidays spent just the three of us when part of me missed the chaos of extended family gatherings. But every time I wavered, I thought about my children crying in that cold basement. I thought about the choice my mother made, and the choice I had to make in response. And I knew I'd done the right thing. Years later, I ran into my sister Nicole at a charity event. We hadn't spoken since the eviction. She looked tired, older than her years. We made awkward small talk for a few minutes, and then she said, "You know, I hated you for what you did. I thought you were heartless." I braced myself for another confrontation, but then she surprised me. But watching Tyler grow up, seeing the entitlement Mom created in him, the way she poisoned our relationship with her manipulation, I get it now. You were protecting your kids. I wish I'd been strong enough to do the same. We didn't become close again. Too much had happened. Too much damage had been done. But we were able to be civil, to nod at each other across rooms at rare extended family gatherings. And that was enough. Not every relationship needs to be restored. Sometimes closure is just accepting that it's over and moving on with grace. I also learned something unexpected through all of this. The community that my mother tried to turn against me largely stood by me. My real friends, the people who truly knew me, they understood. They saw what was happening and they supported my decision. Some of them even shared their own stories of having to set boundaries with toxic family members. I realized I wasn't alone. This wasn't some unique failure. It was a common struggle, one that so many people face in silence. That's why I'm sharing this story now. Not for sympathy, not for validation, but to let other people know that they're not alone. If you're struggling with a toxic parent, a manipulative family member, a situation where you're being forced to choose between your own well-being and someone else's expectations, you're not crazy. You're not selfish. You're not ungrateful. You're human. And you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was that I couldn't save my mother from herself. I couldn't love her into changing. I couldn't sacrifice enough, succeed enough, prove myself enough to make her see my worth. Because the problem was never me. It was always her. And once I accepted that, once I truly internalized it, everything changed. I stopped trying to fix her and started building the life I deserved. I also had to learn to forgive myself. For the years I wasted chasing approval. For the times I chose peace over truth. For not setting boundaries sooner. For exposing my children to that toxicity for as long as I did. Forgiving myself was harder than forgiving my mother. But it was necessary. Because I couldn't move forward while dragging the weight of self-blame behind me. Today, my relationship with Emma and Jackson is the most important thing in my life. I'm not a perfect mother. I make mistakes. I lose my patience sometimes. I don't always have the answers. But I show up. I listen. I prioritize their emotional safety above everything else. And they know, without question, that they are loved exactly as they are. That's the difference. That's what breaks generational cycles. Emma recently asked me about what happened with Grandma Margaret. She's old enough now to understand the complexity of it all. I told her the truth, age-appropriate but honest. I told her that sometimes people who are supposed to love us are incapable of doing it in a healthy way, that it's not a reflection of our worth, but of their limitations, and that we have a responsibility to protect ourselves and the people we love, even if it means disappointing or cutting off family. She thought about it for a long time, then said, "I think you were brave, Mom." That simple statement from my daughter meant more to me than any apology from my mother ever could have, because it told me that she understood, that she knew I'd chosen her, that she felt safe and protected. That was everything. Jackson, on the other hand, doesn't think much about it at all. He was younger when it happened, and his memories of that time are hazy. To him, our little family of 3 has always been enough. He doesn't miss what he never really had. And in some ways, that's a blessing. He doesn't carry the same wounds I did. The cycle is truly broken for him. Looking back now, from the vantage point of 5 years later, I can see the whole picture clearly. The eviction wasn't an end. It was a beginning. It was the moment I stopped living my life according to someone else's script and started writing my own. It was painful, messy, and complicated. But it was necessary. And it led me to a life that is authentically mine. I've also learned that setting that boundary didn't just protect my children. It protected me. It allowed me to heal from decades of emotional manipulation and conditional love. It gave me space to figure out who I was outside of my mother's expectations. And it taught me that I was strong enough to stand alone if I had to. That was a gift I didn't know I needed. Of course, there are still hard moments. Holidays can be bittersweet. Mother's Day is complicated. There are times when I see other families, multi-generational and happy, and I feel a pang of grief for what I never had and what my children won't have. But then I remember, those families have healthy dynamics. Mine didn't. And wishing for something that was never real is just another form of self-harm. Instead, I've built chosen family. Close friends who've become like aunts and uncles to my kids. Colleagues who've supported me through the hardest times. A community of people who love us for who we are, not what we can provide. That's real family. That's the kind of connection that nourishes rather than depletes. And it's enough. More than enough. I've also thrown myself into mentorship. I work with young women in finance, particularly those from difficult family backgrounds. I share my story when it's appropriate, and I watch their faces light up with recognition and relief. So many of us carry the same wounds. So many of us are fighting the same battles. And knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. One young woman I mentor, Sarah, recently told me that my story gave her the courage to set boundaries with her own controlling mother. She said, "You showed me that choosing myself doesn't make me selfish. It makes me strong." Hearing that, knowing that my pain could help someone else avoid the same mistakes, that made everything worthwhile. I've also become an advocate for family therapy and mental health resources. I speak openly about my own therapy journey, about how it helped me understand the patterns I was stuck in and how to break free. I donate to organizations that support children in difficult family situations. I use my platform and my resources to make a difference. Because if my story can help even one person feel less alone, then it matters. As I'm writing this, Emma is upstairs practicing violin for her college auditions. Jackson is in the living room building something elaborate with Legos. The house smells like the dinner I have in the slow cooker. It's a normal Tuesday evening. It's unremarkable. It's perfect. This is what I fought for. This peace. This normalcy. This safe, warm, loving home where my children can just be kids. And you know what? I don't miss the drama. I don't miss the constant tension. The walking on eggshells. The emotional manipulation. I don't miss trying to manage my mother's feelings or anticipate her next criticism. I don't miss any of it. What I have now, this quiet, stable, loving life, is so much better than the chaos I left behind. Sometimes people ask me if I would do anything differently if I could go back. And honestly, no. I wish it hadn't been necessary. I wish my mother had been capable of being the grandmother my children deserved. But given the reality of who she was and the choices she made, I wouldn't change my response. I protected my children. I set boundaries. I chose health over obligation, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. The only thing I might change is that I would have acted sooner. I would have set those boundaries years earlier, before my children were exposed to that toxicity at all. But I can't change the past. I can only learn from it and do better going forward. And that's what I'm committed to doing every single day. As my children get older and start thinking about their own futures, about the families they might one day create, I hope they'll remember this lesson. You teach people how to treat you. You are allowed to have boundaries. You are allowed to protect your peace. And you are never, ever obligated to maintain relationships with people who harm you, regardless of how you're related to them. I also hope they'll remember that real love is unconditional. It doesn't come with strings attached. It doesn't need to be earned or proven. It just is. And anyone who makes you feel like you have to constantly prove your worth isn't loving you the way you deserve. They're controlling you, and you have every right to walk away from that. My name is Rebecca Matthews, and this is my story. It's a story about choosing myself when I'd spent a lifetime putting myself last. It's a story about protecting my children when they needed me most. It's a story about breaking generational cycles and building something better. And it's a story about learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. If you're facing a similar situation, if you're being forced to choose between a toxic family member and your own well-being, I want you to know this. You are strong enough. You are worthy enough. You are brave enough. And you deserve to live a life free from manipulation, guilt, and conditional love. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Choose yourself. Choose your children. Choose peace over chaos, health over obligation, and authentic connection over toxic blood ties. You deserve nothing less. And your children deserve to grow up in a home where they feel safe, valued, and unconditionally loved. Give them that gift. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. 5 years ago, I made the hardest decision of my life. I evicted my parents. I cut off toxic family members. I chose my children over the people who raised me. And it changed everything. It freed me. It healed me. It gave my children a childhood I never had. And I would do it all over again without hesitation. So to anyone out there struggling with similar choices, you're not alone. You're not wrong. You're not selfish. You're protecting yourself and the people you love. And that's not just okay. It's necessary. Be brave. Set the boundary. Choose yourself. You deserve it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've faced similar struggles, please share your experience in the comments below. Let's build a community of people who've chosen health over toxicity, who've set boundaries and survived, who've broken cycles and built better lives. Together, we're stronger. Together, we heal.